Alcatraz, the impregnable supermax prison that was once home to the likes of Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, and Birdman. All of Alcatraz's 14 escape attempts were failures, with the conspirators being swiftly recaptured or killed. Well, all except one. John Anglin and his brother were transferred to Alcatraz in early 1961 after multiple escape attempts at the Atlanta penitentiary. The Anglins were described as gifted swimmers, once, quote, swimming in Lake Michigan as ice still made up the surface. John and Clarence were criminally active at a young age, robbing various banks in the 1950s before finally being apprehended by the police. Frank Morris was born an orphan, jumping from foster home to foster home while simultaneously getting involved in the criminal underworld. After multiple offenses, Morris was arrested during a burglary and sent to Alcatraz in 1960. Allegedly, Morris was quite an intellectual, having an IQ score of 133. As we will later see, this led to Morris spearheading the escape. The trio were also assisted by an associate named Alan West. However, he was not involved in the escape itself. December 1961. Morris and the Anglins, as well as West, were all assigned to adjacent cells. This allowed the inmates to conceptualize a plan in the nighttime. Morris led the men, ordering them to gather various tools such as saw blades from around the prison, as well as metal spoons. With this equipment, the prisoners began to widen the ventilation ducts beneath their cell sinks. On one occasion, they thought to use a makeshift drill made from an old vacuum motor, albeit it was too loud to be viable. In between widening sessions, the men used cardboard to cover their work. Additionally, Frank would frequently play his accordion to block out the noise. Eventually, they could enter the vent and access the nearby utility corridor. It was here where Frank set up shop, using a 1962 issue of Popular Mechanics to assemble lifesavers out of raincoats and many more contraptions. Using liquid plastic and heat from adjacent pipes, Frank and the prisoners were able to create a crude raft. Plywood and screws made up the accompanying paddles. In order to fool the guards, the men made the now infamous dummy heads out of discarded hair, soap, paint, toothpaste, concrete dust, and toilet paper. After gathering their tools, they climbed a shaft to the roof and removed the rivets holding a fan, granting them entry to the prison's exterior. And so, after about 6 months of hard work, the 4 inmates had a chance at liberation. The escape was set for the night of June 11, 1962. Frank and the Anglins carefully removed their vent covers, placing the dummy heads to prevent suspicion. Alan West, however, was unable to follow. Earlier, West had applied cement to the crumbling concrete around his vent, and now it had hardened. When he was finally able to exit his cell, the trio had long been gone. So, he did the most sane thing and went back to bed. The escapees navigated through the service corridor and climbed the roof. This was heard by the guards as some reported hearing a crash, but it ultimately failed to be investigated. The men continued, sliding down a kitchen pipe and going up a barbed wire fence. It is believed they chose a part of the shoreline near the power plant to depart on the raft towards Angel Island. This area lacked any visibility from the numerous guard towers and searchlights. From this point on, it is not known what exactly happened to the trio. According to West, the plan was to reach the mainland after arriving in Angel Island, where the escapees would steal clothes and a car. Guards only discovered the heads they had been counting were fake the following morning. Immediately, both the military and police began a search by air, land, and sea. June 14th, a Coast Guard cutter discovered a lost paddle approximately 200 yards from Angel Island. Later that day, some workers found a plastic-wrapped wallet that contained names, addresses, and photos of the Anglins' friends and family. June 21st, remnants of the raft are located near the Golden State Bridge. The very next day, a prison boat encountered a deflated life vest not too far from Alcatraz Island. The Norwegian ship SS Norwegian claimed to have seen a floating body about 15 miles from the Golden State Bridge, yet they did not report until October of that same year. Henry Turco, the San Francisco County coroner, challenged the possibility that the body could have belonged to one of the inmates. Instead, he believed it to be that of Cecil Philip Herman, a former banker who committed suicide after jumping off the Golden State Bridge. To this day, no clothing or bodily remains belonging to Morris or the Anglins have ever been found. Even at the investigation's conception, the FBI and authorities were convinced that the inmates did not survive. Since then, the FBI has listed various reasons for why they believe the prisoners met their end. Starting with 1, the water in the currents would have complicated any sort of travel, whether they swam or rode on a raft. 2. Wisted claimed the 3 were supposed to steal clothing and a means of transportation upon arriving in the mainland, but according to the FBI, no such crimes were ever reported. 3. The men likely would have been located quickly as they had access to no financial aid or support of any kind from their family. 4. Finally, no evidence exists to prove Frank and the Anglins are still alive. The FBI's argument is pretty tight-knit, making complete sense. However, some revelations and stories have emerged that challenge the 4 points. Starting with the first point, it is very possible the men could have reached safety, even if they swam. If you'll remember, the Anglins were described as gifted swimmers being able to navigate through even the hardest of conditions. Furthermore, not too long after the trio had escaped, an inmate named John Paul Scott successfully swam from Alcatraz to the southern point of the Golden State Bridge with homemade water wings. Although, it should be noted upon reaching the shore he passed out from exhaustion and developed hypothermia. Provided that the men had access to a raft, lifesavers, and paddles, it would make sense if even only one man made it to the shore. Moving on to point 2. Some sources claim that on the night of the escape, a 1955 Chevy truck was reported missing in Marin County, a part of California near Alcatraz. However, I was not able to find an official police report regarding the theft. We are of course talking about the 1960s, so poor record keeping is to be expected. Okay, point 3. An anecdote by a San Francisco police officer suggests that the trio may have had even more accomplices. According to Robert Cecchi, in the morning of June 12th, at 1 a.m., an illegal boat stopped at the Bay of Alcatraz and then made its way towards the Golden State Bridge. Lastly, point 4. The following piece of evidence is perhaps the most substantial. Fred Bresci, a family friend of the Anglins, shared a photo of what he claims to be John and Clarence in Brazil. An AI scan of the photo later resulted in a positive match, albeit Bresci's credibility is questionable. His own wife once described him as a con man and a storyteller. So for now, the fate of the 3 remains ambiguous. Unlike Morris and the Anglins, the other characters involved in this story received a definitive ending. Alan West, after cooperating with investigators, was transferred from facility to facility, where he spent the rest of his life behind bars until his death in 1978 of peritonitis. The FBI officially closed their case on December 31st, 1979, handing their findings to the U.S. Marshal Service. As for Alcatraz itself, it closed down on March 21st, 1963, under the direction of Robert F. Kennedy, leaving behind one of America's greatest mysteries.